Your ops manual is either your best field rep or your biggest liability. Today, we're getting into what actually needs to live in the ops manual, what doesn't, and why the document nobody wants to talk about is the one that holds your entire system together. Welcome to Dear Frannie, the franchise advice column. I'm your host, Katherine LeBlanc. And along with my co host, James Vetrano, we've spent our careers inside growing franchise systems. From marketing to operations, we break down real questions and real challenges and share the kind of answers you only get from experience. Let's jump in. Thanks for joining us today on Dear Frannie. I'm your host, Katherine.
I'm her co-host, James.
Today, we are kicking off again with a this or that. I'm excited about today's episode, James, because we're getting into some territory that I am excited to pick your brain about. So
Uh-oh.
let's start with our this or that question. So, should we enforce standards through authority and consequences? So, for example, should we default everybody who doesn't follow our standards? Or should we drive standards through proof, performance, and peer examples? I'm going to take, since you're the lawyer of the group, I'm going to take drive standards through proof, performance, and peer examples. Does
You're
that work for you?
pigeonholing me. I mean, I guess. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I think you should drive standards through proof, performance, and peer examples instead of always pulling out the default because this franchising is an influence game. You, as a franchisor, are in charge of influencing your franchisees into doing what you know is best for the business. And so, yes, franchisees are going to come in, they're buying your business in a box, which you should have. They're buying some sort of proprietary process or method, which you should have. But at the end of the day, they are running their own business. And so, to influence them into doing what we want them to do as far as following standards and getting to the profitability that we want them to get, we should drive that performance through examples. And so that's why people love conferences. They love the peer sharing. They love talking to other franchisees because it's proof that what you do works.
Okay, like the marketer in you is so like ingrained. Franchising is not about influencing. Like, no, franchising is about you doing what the franchisor has created to a
Yeah.
T. That's franchising, right? Otherwise, go open Catherine's Lollipop Stand, right?
Hmm.
But if you're going to open a franchise of my brand, you're going to do the brand the way I say the brand needs to be run. And now, if the brand
Yep.
don't work, that's on me. But I do agree that you are running your own business within the confines of our parameters of the franchising. But I'm not here to influence you on a darn thing. I'm here to tell you the brand standards are X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C, and the rest of the alphabet. Additionally, you're going to do the things that you're supposed to do under the franchise agreement, or I am writing you a default letter. And while I am all for persuading and coaching and developing, if I have to ask multiple times for you to sell my taco the way my taco is supposed to be made, we got a problem.
Yeah.
So, as the lawyer of the group, look, I hate default letters. I hate lawyers. But at a certain point in time, if you've signed on to be a franchisee of a brand, it's the brand's responsibility to put forth the standards, operating manuals, and procedures necessary for you as a franchisee to be successful in executing that. But this
Hmm.
isn't I need you to serve my hamburger the right way. This is you're supposed to serve my hamburger this way. And
Yeah.
if it doesn't work, then that's on me. And if you're not doing it right, then it's on you. Now, if we have to get to a point where I'm sending you a default letter, like the relationship's broken. It's broken. Like we got to figure
Hmm.
that out. So if I'm the general counsel and you're coming to me saying, marketing person or franchise ops person, we got to default this person. Like my first thing is going to be like, why are we here already? And what have
Mm.
we done to avoid this? And what are the underpinning issues associated with it? And if it
Yep.
is that, we're a bagel company and you're selling pancakes and we don't offer pancakes, that's a problem. right?
Mhm.
But if it's,
Yeah.
we're a bagel company and you don't want to offer every flavor you want, like we need to have we discussed why, right? Is it a shipping
Mhm.
issue? Is it a cost issue? Is it
Mhm.
like it just doesn't sell because it's a waste issue? But the principle is as a franchisor for a franchisee, this is how the brand needs to be run. My job to give you those parameters and the tools necessary to execute it. Your job to execute when it's within here. Now, how you do your P&L, there's some flexibility there, right? Your labor, your scheduling, what you call your business, all your HR stuff, right? Maybe some local store marketing flexibility, but the brand is the brand and your marketing self can influence all you want outside of here, but right up in here, we're doing it, or let's get that lollipop stand open.
You know where I see this go wrong, James? Because I mean,
Teach.
you're right. I think that we have to follow brand standards, but then there's also friction because, to your point, if you get to a default letter, what went wrong between then and now? And what I see is that when you don't have an enforcement plan
Oh,
or an
yeah.
enforcement process. And so you say, well, how did we get here? Well, because we didn't want to have the hard conversation. We didn't have a process for how these hard conversations should be had. We didn't have an escalation ladder for the escalation to go up. And so now I'm bringing it to my lawyer or my general counsel, if I have them in house, and saying, here, you fix it. You send them a default and fix it. And to your point, once it's gotten to there, then there's resentment likely built up. There is, ingrained reasons now because this has gone on for months that this franchisee doesn't want to carry the blueberry bagel or whatever it is you're trying to enforce. So I think that, I actually agree with you on this, and as far as we have to enforce the brand standards, and so you won this one. But
What?
the number one, it's what are the brand standards, and do you
Right.
have them recorded in a way that is referenceable? And then number two, what is your escalation process so that you aren't dependent on defaults?
Well, and you nailed it. At the end of the day, if something's happening in the operation or execution of the brand from a franchisor's perspective as it relates to a franchisee, we need to have a very clear understanding of why this is happening if it's outside the parameters of the brand, right? And so then there needs to be a process that either says, hey, franchisee, we're going to give you an exception on this because of these circumstances, or hey, franchisee, we can't and here's why, or we won't, and here's why. And then that has to have a definitive sort of flow through on the corporate side of things and follow through at the actual franchise base. And now from a franchisee's perspective as well, though, like your rationale is not necessarily going to align with the brand's perspective sometimes. And so while you may have an unbelievably legitimate reason for not wanting to sell the blueberry bagels because blueberry commodity's gone up and shipping it is, I don't know what it is. You're in Key West and
Mm,
it's hard to get blueberries there. That's sort of sometimes part of the party that you went to when you're franchising, right?
yeah.
So if I've got a brand and one of my pillars is having, the blueberry bagel available at all locations, you're gonna have to have the blueberry bagel
Hmm.
available at that location. So to your point, if we've gotten to a default letter, like something's gone awry and we haven't really spent the time understanding why are we holding the line or do we need to hold this line?
Hmm.
It's usually a marketing fault though. I just in my experience. No, just kidding.
Well, I run into this a lot on marketing, if I'm honest, because we talk about,
Tell me.
required spending, we talk about required channels that you need to spend in, we talk about, y the playbooks that we create that say, here's what you gotta do, and look, when it comes down to it, we can only enforce what is either in the FDD or in the ops manual through this default process, and so the thing that I usually get stuck in the middle on is the spend. And number one, how are we proving that they're spending? And number two, if they're spending under, how do we get them to spend more? And that's
Well, and
where,
that's a really tough point, right? Like
yeah.
as a marketing person, I would or professional, I would definitively think that's problematic on both sides. When you have a system that is not requiring or upholding the spend from a LSM standpoint or local store marketing initiatives, to turn that back on hurts everybody, right? Because the franchisees cash flow gets impacted. They've been not spending it for a year or two or three. And so then you come to me as a franchisee and say, hey, there's 2% you're not spending and you need to be, and that 2% is going in my pocket. I don't want it to go
Mhm.
out.
Yep.
So, you know, the marketing professionals in the franchise world sometimes have to take that on the chin. And that isn't really the marketing people's fault unless they've owned it from the beginning. And so,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I think my advice would be, hey, if it's in your FDD as a definitive or your franchise agreement as a definitive, make sure it's being done from day one. If it's an option, then that's a whole nother thing. But if it says these are the 8, 9, 10 things that I'm going to do as a franchisor, and these are the 5, 7, 12 things that you have to do as the franchisee, both in the franchise agreement and then under the ops manual, the longer you go not upholding that, the more problematic it is. And look, I'm not giving any legal advice here. I haven't read the case law in a while, but there's case law in ancillary issues where, for instance, in your home, so in your subdivision, like a lot of places have homeowners associations. If you don't enforce that homeowners association rule or bylaw for X number of years, and it's been open and obvious for X number of years, it's considered waived. So if I have a bush I'm not supposed to have, and I've been having it for 3 years, and you come as a homeowner association and say you got to take that bush out. Certain states have certain jurisprudence that says, hey, you waived that. Now, I haven't looked at in the franchising jurisprudence, but the advice is the same. Hey, if you've been sitting on this requirement for 2 or 3 or 4 years and you haven't enforced it, no matter what language is in there that may say I can enforce it at any time or lack of enforcement isn't a waiver, I still think the franchisee's got a legitimate point to go. For 3 years, I haven't spent this 2%, right? So I
Yeah.
do think the processes are important to your point. Hey guys, I
Well, and
lost
I
you.
would add, number 1, the process is what fixes that, and then number 2, holding them accountable to those standards from the
Yeah,
get-go,
for
because
sure.
anything that slips, it's like it's a slippery slope. So that leads us to our Dear Franny question. It's a great segue, actually, because our Dear Franny question today is about the ops manual.
Yes.
So our listener is asking, our ops manual keeps getting bigger, but it's harder to use, not easier. What actually needs to live in an ops manual and what shouldn't if it's supposed to help franchisees run better businesses?
Whoever wrote this, like, you didn't give me a heads up that we were going to be answering it because I think like we have to charge. This is a big one, right? Like it's a really big one.
Mhm.
Um, so, um, I'm reading it again, right? So, what actually needs to live in the ops manual? As a guy who has created franchise ops manuals, like if you're a franchisor and you have your own stores, your corporate manual is not and should not be your franchise manual. It just should not be. Like there's things in there that are just not beneficial nor applicable to the franchisee under a variety of laws, right? Like employment issues, all that kind of stuff. If it's in your ops manual, that stuff needs to be, removed. But in my opinion, but I definitely think the three things when it comes to ops manual, one, it needs to be very much focused on running the brand and the execution of the brand, right? So that's one. And what do I mean by that? The food first and foremost, right? And the actual atmosphere of the internal workings of the brand. There needs to be reference to the trade design and trade dress. You need to rope in the marketing stuff in there, right? Like the ops manual kind of needs to grab all of that. So the running of the brand both in store and out of store needs to be grasped from how you make the food all the way down to how do you sell it and how do you sell it to the public. Second,
So
and we talked
James,
about well, let me finish
wait,
this.
can I ask you a
I talked
question?
about yes, but let me finish this because I'll forget because I'm
Okay.
old. Like we talked about this before, right? Big R, little R, right? You got to review and revise. You can't just let it go untouched. And then the last thing is cull it. You got to cull it. You can't just it just can't go on forever. So go on with the question. Those are my three because I'll forget them.
So what you said was, at number 1, you have to include all of the business information, including the how you make the food, and so we're talking about food brand right now, but essentially it's your menu, whatever your product is, your in-store design, and then or some of your in-store design and then some marketing things. And so if I'm sitting down to write my ops manual, am I writing out, here's how you flip the patty, here's what the burger is, or is it more so like we offer this on our menu and these parts are required and these parts are optional?
Yeah, so I think, the ops manual doesn't necessarily have to have in it, like, how you cook the burger, if you will, right? But it needs to reference the cooking manual or processes, right? So my vision of a perfect ops manual is something that is manageable, usable, and not overly comprehensive that references the three or four other brand aspects that need to be the Bible, if you will, how one runs insert brand. So, you know, cooking, right? Menu,
Mhm,
right? In-store layout and trade dress, right? And then I do think there needs to be a marketing component of
mhm.
the
Yeah, I
ops
agree with
manual
that.
that gives
Yep.
that gives parameters, right? It gives
Right.
parameters. And
Right.
keep in mind, it's a living document, right? It's not static.
Well, and the way I think about it is it's like this is the living, breathing, this is how the brand operates. And
Amen.
so if the brand requires from a marketing perspective that you are on certain channels because certain brands and concepts need like home services, right? You have to have an online presence. You have to have a solid Google business profile listing. You have to have these certain things because you don't have a brick and mortar. And
Yep.
so and maybe like for example, you have to have a van that is wrapped in this branding, right? So it's almost like number 1 it's the basics of this is how what you have to do in order to be successful. And then number 2, it's this is why we franchise. This is the
Well,
proprietary secret sauce.
I would say the number one, this is what you have to do, not necessarily be successful, but what this is what you have to do to run the brand, right? This is what
Okay.
has to be done. And then two, these are the things that we expect you to do relative to running the brand, right?
Okay.
And those
Yeah.
things can have multiple numbers of. I kind of going back into my world as a lawyer when I used to do healthcare law. I represented doctors and hospitals. The ops manual is a little bit like the patient's medical record, right? In the sense
Mhm.
of, as a patient, we have no input. I can't put anything in my medical record, or at least I couldn't back in the day. Other people put stuff about me in my medical record, right? Well, the ops manual is something that the franchisee, being the patient here, doesn't add to. The franchisor is the
Mhm.
healthcare team that's saying these are the things that are going on into the body that is the franchise. Also, that's the only amendable, adjustable, fluid documentation between a franchisor and a franchisee. So it's incumbent upon the franchisor to put
Yeah.
that into into the operating manual, and it's almost imperative that the franchisee is intimately familiar with it. And I do think franchisors don't spend enough time on it, and franchisees don't really dive into it.
Mhm.
So this is a real sticky widget that isn't really sexy that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it's where the rubber meets the road, right? Because if you come in to my store as the franchisor and say that's not brand compliant, I'm going to go, where does that say it
Mhm.
isn't in this? Because just because you said Catherine, no offense to you, Catherine,
Yeah,
you
none
know,
taken. But, and I hear this though from the ops teams too of, how do I hold franchisees to the standard if we haven't recorded what the standard is?
or pick the standard, right? And think about it in
Yeah.
larger franchise brands, right? Like you might have 2, 3 standards across regions, right?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
it's a real operational pain point for the franchise ops folks. And it's
Mhm.
really hard for the franchisees because, you get all this for the larger systems, you get a lot of communication from the franchisor, you get inundated, right? What is my
Yeah.
when is it marching orders for me?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then for smaller brands, it's really hard because it's not sexy or fun to get the ops manual. You can't really afford anybody to get up there and type it.
Exactly, because 'cause they're out there executing, and so it's like somebody has to pause their execution to work on this document that you think is just collecting dust, but is
Right.
actually a tool for you to ensure the longevity of your brand.
And you said this much more eloquently than I will here, right? The ops manual is that sort of codifying body that says, here is something that is replicatable and franchisable, right? Like that's
Mhm.
the versus going to look at the shiny object of a new store or functionality or service offering, right? The
Mhm.
ops manual is really where we put pen to paper and give you, franchisee, the block and tackle, the brick and mortar of building the house that you paid X number of
Right.
thousands of dollars to be a part of and pay a royalty on. So, you know, I don't think enough time is spent culling the ops manual, building the ops manual, and focused on it. In my experience, that's been the case.
Yeah.
That's been the
Well, and what
case. And no,
happens
and
so what's
nobody
the
owns it.
consequence of that?
A couple things. I think you end up with, a varied system for sure, right? Like in my days at Ruby Tuesday internationally, you know, I was the only person that had visited all of our stores that were opened at that time in the various countries we'd gone to. Iceland was doing things totally different than Romania, and Romania was doing things totally different than Kuwait, and Kuwait was doing things totally different than Guam, right? And
Mhm.
Chile was doing whatever the heck it wanted to do. So I think the first and foremost is lack of a cohesive, standardized ops manual is a failure of the franchisor to meet one of its basic obligations under the franchise agreement, right? One of its prerequisite obligation. Two, gives a lot of leeway to the franchisee because as an entrepreneur, if you don't give me the parameters, I got to figure it out myself.
Yeah.
I got to make some money, so I'm going to try my best based off of what I'm seeing or what I can think of. Three, it needs to give me a playbook on where the brand is going, where the
Mhm.
brand is and where the brand's going, so that I can make the appropriate investments at my store. And then the fourth thing is like, it's never been clear to me in any of the companies I've worked with or for who owns the ops
Yes.
manual, both
Right.
both for corporate stores as well as for franchisees. And I think that's
Mhm.
a leadership problem that nobody pays
Mhm.
attention to. And the ultimate issue is if we end up in litigation like some of these large brands are, right? Like the lawyer in me is going to say, franchise agreement, FED franchise agreement one, ops manual two.
Mhm.
And if it's not in there or hasn't been, conveyed to the franchisee, I think the franchisor's got problems.
Yeah. Yeah, so the biggest consequence is you get taken to court and you don't have anything to back you up on. I'll give you a micro example of something I've seen happen at a number of brands that I've been at that is really interesting to me, and it's hours of operation. So we have
Yeah, it's a
corporate
really good
stores.
one.
Yeah, corporate stores have these hours of operation, or like you say, like, okay, we're a lunch spot, and this is what our hours of operation are going to be. And then you have a franchisee who maybe doesn't wanna work but 3 days a week, so their store is only open 3 days a week. Or you have one that's like, "Well, we need to be open for breakfast and dinner even though our menu doesn't support breakfast and dinner, so I'm gonna be open 6 to, whatever, 11." And that just I think is a great micro example of when you don't have that an ops manual updated and that type of information listed, those are the inconsistencies that you can have. And when you have franchisees asking for how do I become more profitable and you look at their hours of operation and they're open for 20 hours a week, then you're like, "Well, open more," and they don't want to. There's that causes a lot of friction, and there's no way to hold them to the standard and to make sure they get started with the standard. And I've been at a brand where the opening process is, "Franchisee, what are your hours of operation?" And they look at us and say, like, "I
Tell
don't
me.
know. What
Right.
are they?"
Yeah, right.
And
And
so
it's a
it's
really
like
great example. The other thing is
yeah,
holidays. What are the holidays?
holidays are a great example. Yes. Yeah,
Like
because
what are
then
the
you got some
holidays that
folks
the
closing, like, once a month for a holiday, and then your same store sales are crap because this store won't open on holidays.
Yeah, and it creates brand confusion and misalignment across, and if you have a mixed DMA with multiple franchisees in a certain, let's say, a Dallas market, the customer gets confused. So,
Mhm.
the ops manual is something that, no one likes to talk about, but it really is where the rubber meets the road of operations, franchise enforcement, and franchisee execution. And again, I put it out there to anybody that listens to us. I don't know why anybody listens to me, but I'm sure they get something from you. If anybody can in the comments say who owns ops manuals, like that would be, I would like to know. I still don't know at any of the companies I either worked at or ran. So, you know, I'll get on that right
Well,
away.
yeah, I think that that's one of
Marketing
my
should own
takeaways
it.
today.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Marketing should own ops
Yeah.
manual.
Yeah, you're gonna see something super fun if you see if marketing owns it, I tell you that right now, because we
All
are
right,
the
come
fun.
on, give me your top
Your
three. I
top 3,
don't want to
okay,
go
this is
first.
my top 3 for today. So, number 1, establish an escalation process so
Okay.
that James is right, you should enforce your brand standards, and if you have an escalation process, that enforcement doesn't always have to mean default, and I think that's where you can kind of soften it. Number 2, have a clear owner of your ops manual. If nobody owns it, it's not getting done. And then number 3, I'm gonna steal a takeaway that I don't know if you went into it a lot this episode, but you kind of referenced it, the little R and the big R. So have a review process for your ops manual that allows you to not for it not to be a burden. And if it has been reviewed and has had changes, it's a big R. If it's been reviewed and it doesn't have changes, it's a little R, if I remember that correctly. And I just thought that was really smart to do a quarterly
Let's go.
review of your ops manual.
Which is
All
owned
right,
by
James.
marketing.
That's right.
I think like one, if we are up against a default issue, we've made a mistake. If you are dealing with some misalignment in the brand relative to franchisee franchise or expectation or an execution, there needs to be some process in place on the escalation side, right? Like how are we memorializing what we're allowing, or how are we diagnosing what we are saying no to? Second, I think we need to know who owns the ops manual. Like ops manuals need to get a little bit more love in the technological world we are today. It should be, to your point, it's a living document. We need to make sure that somebody owns it, like marketing, and that it's constantly being updated and communicated to the franchisee. Number three is brand alignment via the ops manual will ensure that two things happen. At a minimum, if something has to be done from the franchise agreement, the ops manual, ensuring it's being done from day one is imperative.
Mm,
And that alleviates stress on marketing and franchisees, right? But secondly, brand alignment relative to expectation of both operational hours and operational, like those things are the simple things that create massive customer confusion. So
mhm.
my
Yeah.
top three are really kind of in line with yours today. And I think it was a really technical topic today. So,
It
not
was,
really
but like you
sexy on the
said,
business side.
it doesn't get a lot of attention, and I think that, I think that you have a lot of great experience to add to the table when it comes to the importance of the document, and I certainly have seen in real life, in real time, what not having a solid document does, not only for the success of the ops teams, but for the success of the franchisee.
Yeah, and I think the call out here is to, when you wrap it up, it's like, hey, manuals, not sexy, unbelievably necessary. And
Mhm.
so if y'all are out there struggling with ops manuals, give Catherine a call. She'll charge you a good rate.
It'll be double the rate for a marketer to do your ops manual. Well, if our discussion feels familiar, you're not behind, you're right on time. Thank you for joining us on Dear Frannie, and please share this with somebody who needs to know they are not alone.